Welcome, NuMinds Nation. Here we are at another episode of the NuMinds podcast with another absolutely fascinating guests. So you know that at NuMinds we're all about divergent thinking, lateral thinking. We do a lot of work with teachers and with parents in order to nurture divergent thinking and innovation in kids. And it's always an honor when we get to talk with a tried and true innovator who's actually made it their life's path. So my guest today on the podcast is Phnam Bagley. She is the creative director at Nonfiction Design, a company which she co-founded. She's also a teacher at the California College of the Arts and has an absolutely diverse background in the world of design. I'm gonna read some of these, particular fields and subfields that she's done design work for. Hardware and audio, wearables, neurotech, biotech, luxury and fashion, packaging, sports, aerospace. If that's not a beautifully wide gamut of fields to do design work in, I don't know what is. And so I want to welcome Phnam to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah. So, here at NuMinds, like I mentioned in the intro here, we consider ourselves a pretty creative startup. I would consider ourselves designers in the world of education and pedagogy and curriculum and things like that. But, one of our ultimate goals is to create the designers and the innovators of the future, basically create future use, right? And so I want to kind of start there. I'm wondering if you can kind of transport yourself back a little bit at some point in your childhood. I don't know where that point will be, when you started to realize that this world of creating, of innovating, was a place you were comfortable in. When did you start considering yourself a creative person?
Actually, very late in life.
Really?
It did not start in childhood. In childhood, I was a nerd. I was interested in physics and math and things like that. So part of my background is in aerospace architecture. I used to design spacecraft. I went to school for that. And eventually in my early 20s, that's what I did. But that is how I grew up. I grew up really nurturing a lot of very, straightforward thinking about things. In order to go to the moon, you have to do those things, and this is how it's been done. And it was not really creative. And I discovered that kind of by error. By the end of my high school career, I happened to walk towards a booth in a job fair where a design school was presenting their work. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. And one thing I discovered about myself when I saw that booth is that I like things that I don't know yet. I like to explore things that I'm completely useless and without any knowledge in, and really dive deep. And another thing that I learned by myself is that I always finish what I start. So I signed up for that school. It was the first booth I saw, by the way. Like, I didn't see anything else. Yeah. I just walked in. I'm like, design schools, that sounds great. Let's sign up. And I got in, and I did very well. I had to catch up because I was not particularly creative, or I didn't know how to use the tools. And back then, I haven't really touched a computer, so holding a mouse was kind of new, and so I caught up and did well. And very interestingly, in the third year of the 5-year program I was there. That was in France, by the way. I am French. That I was not born in the U.S. I moved to the U.S. when I was 23. So I studied in a design school called Strat, which is outside of Paris. And in the third year, something very serendipitous happened. The school opened their aerospace department. And guess who's the first one who signed up, right? So I signed up. I thrived in that world. I spent the rest of my school career there designing spacecraft. And I had the time of my life. And after that, I was invited to get my master's in aerospace architecture at the University of Houston in Texas, at a place called SICSA. So SICSA used to be under the umbrella of the College of Architecture. Now it's under the umbrella of the College of Engineering. And that is where I, learned a lot about the history of American and Russian spacecraft, also lunar and Martian habitats, We did a lot of pressurized rovers on surfaces and things like that. So during this whole time, I was developing my sense of creativity, of really solving problems. And I didn't really see myself as a particularly creative person, even though I kind of look like one. I always based my creativity in logic. I need to get somewhere. I need to do this thing. I need to, for my users to feel this way. Therefore, this is how I'm going to get there. So my creative process is extremely logical. And that's probably the reason why I get along with technical people. And the language that I use when I talk about creative things is extremely technical.
Yeah. Repeat that last phrase again.
So the
phrase that you
way
use.
I think, the way I think about myself as a creative person is very technical.
Yeah.
In order to get to a place that is done for the first time, or the way people perceive it as being very creative is actually through logic. I use intuition, I use logic, I use my own experience in life to actually get to places that appear to be new to others.
Yeah, I love that. So obviously there's some synchronicity points in that journey there that are definitely, worth exploring even more. But what I love is the fact that you have married these two things that are supposed to be the antithesis of each other, right? Which is the logic and the intuition, or the creativity and the linear, right? And for you, it's not a conflict because you actually see it's all one thing. It's problem solving. And that's really beautiful. That sort of embraces this sort of STEM mentality when it's done right. It's about solving open-ended problems that make the world better. And that's essentially what you're doing. It's not like you're trying to wear this mantle of like I'm the creative with a capital C. It is really practical. And I have a feeling that from the outside looking in, if we were to watch your process and watch your problem solving, we would see the creativity there, but you're not thinking of it from the inside out in those terms. It's just problem solving. And another fascinating thing about your story, in my opinion, is, wow, so do you know the number of people who would just have that dream of like, I want to design aircraft? I have a feeling that a lot of them, when they got there, they'd think, okay, I'm at the pinnacle. Like, I'm done. Like, that's whether you're coming at it from the creative side or the engineering side or whatever lane you arrived at that point from, that's kind of like a big deal. That's a pinnacle, right? Designing spacecraft, it doesn't get much cooler than that, does it?
Well, that is why I got in, because I thought it was really cool. That it was a lot of innovation. It was very outerworldly, literally. But once I got there, I realized that designing architectures and products for people who are highly trained to use these designs is actually not that complex. Designing things for everyday people, for people with disability, for children, for the elderly, that's infinitely more complex. So a lot of people, when they look at my resume, they're like, well, so why did you ever leave that pinnacle, as you call it? I'm like, well, it was not that interesting, especially back then. I was in that world about 15 years ago. And, all the SpaceX and all the very exciting companies today didn't really exist yet. So everything related to space was very traditional. And I'm very grateful that I know how these work and I know how to build these. But the really creative aspect of it and the really human-centered way of creating things for the long term was missing. I tried very hard to integrate these aspects into that world, but as you can imagine, not everybody was listening. So that's why I wanted to develop myself and change career and become what's called an industrial designer. Some people call us hardware designers. So we design physical objects, some with electronics, some without, or wearables or anything like that, that people can buy and use in everyday life. So to me, having practiced in both worlds, designing those small products that everybody has access to for $200 or $300 is infinitely more difficult.
I love that. I love that framework. Yeah. It's a whole different kind of challenge. There's something else you mentioned Now, you didn't use this word in your story, but the way you described kind of being drawn to to fields and things that you're not an expert in, there's almost like a certain vulnerability and sense of wonder that you kind of brought to it. That kind of it seems to me that it leaves you open for this type of challenge. And I would not be surprised if we talked again in 10 years if you haven't made another leap into some kind of unexpected but parallel field. Like, you seem to have that disposition. And for me, that's a tie into sort of this concept in education and elsewhere of kind of a growth versus a fixed mindset. You mentioned like being raised with more of a linear thinking pattern, which, could lend itself to a real fixed mindset. Like if I can't do it right, I'm not going to risk putting myself out there and looking incompetent. But you seem to really embrace this sense of, I may not know, but that's what intrigues me about this, and I'm going to stick with it. And that's the other piece. Oh my goodness, there's so many lessons here. The other piece is the grit. You talked about kind of being really tenacious about when you start something, you finish it. And that actually, in some of the academic research about creativity, sometimes that's cited as just as important as any other aspect of creativity, is sort of the tenaciousness and the grit, sticking with it long enough to find that novel solution. So yeah, go ahead.
I mean, and that has been a little bit of a problem for me connecting with others, where I see people being quote unquote passionate about certain things. And then, they get excited for about 6 months and then move on to something else. And to me, that is not passion. Also, I've struggled a lot with the definition of passion. Everybody experiences passion differently. To me, passion is something that you cannot live without, right? Whether it's art or the way you live, your family, whatever it is. And that's why I've never been able to pinpoint what my passion is. It's not a thing. It's not a discipline. It's not a world. It's it's a lot blurrier than that. And I don't think it's a default. I think it has helped me keeping my eyes open, my heart open as well, to what other people have to say. And every time I see something interesting, it's not like, oh, you're the expert, I don't know anything, I'm going to stay where I am. It's like, no, I want to take notes. I want to follow you around. I want to know how you do this, and I want to know how I can do it better. Right? And that's what we do at the company that I run. We're not interested in designing another product. It's the same, using the same technology. We're interested in taking technologies and thinking and history from different worlds and connecting them together in a way that nobody else has ever done. That is what we do for a living. And that is how creativity should work. In creativity, a lot of people think, oh, you thought of this, out of nowhere. That is not the case. You have memories, you have experiences stuck in your head, whether you're conscious of it or not, and you're just, grabbing whatever works for you today. And to me, creative business people, creative, designers or whatever, that's how they're brilliant. They know how to connect things. And now, coming back to your second point, there's a difference between connecting things and knowing the genius of it and implementing it. And the implementation part of it is also something I'm really passionate about, because knowing that nobody else has solved that problem is the most exciting thing to me, right? There's nothing more important and motivating than knowing that nobody on this planet has ever done this before.
I love that. I love that thought. That is exciting. Yeah. So about 15 years ago, you left this kind of aerospace world, and you kind of began this journey. Was nonfiction design, was that the project 15 years ago? Has that been around since?
No, nonfiction started 4 years ago.
Okay.
In between, I had a career in industrial design, working full time as a freelancer for a long time, worked at many different consulting firms, and learned a lot from people on what to do, what not to do from a creative standpoint, from a business standpoint. And 4 years ago, I came in with my own husband, who's also a designer, and we formed this company that is doing things not only creatively, but also ethically. The ethics of the business of design was something that was very important to me because I had seen year after year certain practice that I was not on board with. And to me, the only way to lead change is to just start the business that shows the example. And that's what happened 4 years ago.
Yeah, I love it. So all right. So let's go back to that thought of like being the first person on planet Earth to solve a particular problem. Can you give an example of something? Give an example of a moment that you've had in that space that just really fueled that for you.
So there's a project that came out last year called Human Headphones. Yeah. So Human Headphones had a very interesting challenge. So the founder wanted an on-ear headphone that was without a band. So as you can imagine, how do you put it on your head if there's no band?
Right.
And the challenge was to really understand, the geometry of the ear, knowing that every single ear is different. Some are small, some are thin, some are big, some are fat, some are uneven. And it needed to solve all of these problems, like being very secure in the head, not hitting certain parts, very sensitive parts of the ear. It needed to have like decent sound quality, and for that sound not to escape in places that were not necessary. It needed to have this very natural kind of like a user experience, whether it's with the interaction where the whole thing doesn't have any button, you control everything with your fingers by swiping the surface. And all of that was so many new things coming together, a new form factor. And it was very difficult. Took us a while to figure that out. But eventually we ended up with this gorgeous shape that looked so simple and so natural on the body, but was extremely difficult to achieve.
Imagine. When I saw the image of them on your website, I actually found myself looking for the band. Like, wait, how is that staying on the ear? Where is that connected? Like an optical illusion.
And we actually refine the geometry of this headphone using 3D printing technology until the day I was able to wear one of those headphones, do a handstand, and the thing didn't move.
Oh, nice. So that was like the test, right?
I think it was the VP of engineering of that company took the video of me in the company. It's very funny. So another thing, and that brings up a very interesting point as well. This is work. This is serious work, but taking away the seriousness of serious work is equally as important as everything creative. To me, you could be wearing a suit and being boring all day and using all the buzzwords of that everybody's using. That's not interesting to me. Like, I walk away. I have no interest in that. When you are hired as a designer, as a creative, it is your responsibility to inspire others to think outside of the way they've been thinking for so long. And that has repercussion in everything, in the way they listen to you, in the way they make decisions, in the way it inspires the work that you do in the future, even in their home life. I believe that that's creativity, practicing creativity on a daily basis is healthy for the soul, the heart, and the brain. So that's what I've been doing.
I have so many follow-up questions on that. Number one, just to jump back, do you have some advice? What are some ways that at Nonfiction Design that you guys take the serious out of the serious business? What, like, just on a daily basis, what part of your culture as a company, what are some things you do to take the serious out of it?
It comes to the language first. It's not really a hierarchical organization. I speak to anybody the same way. Everybody speaks to me the same way. We joke all the time. And also we create together. I think creating together is one of the most important tools that we've developed in a way that really works for us. So I've worked in many different consulting firms in the past, and it was a lot of like creating at the same table but separately,
Mm.
and then judging things together. And to me, there was something missing, but I was not sure what. And so at Nonfiction, we developed a way to create together. And you can see some drawings behind me.
Yeah.
What happened is, this is just like a personal project, but what happened here is, instead of having everybody doing those like very high quality sketches that take some long time to develop, we actually all grab a really crappy whiteboard marker and start drawing ideas. Mm-hmm. Nobody cares how pretty the drawing is. Nobody cares where it came from. Nobody cares how silly it is. We just put it on, and then we'll build on each other's ideas, and then we add a color, and then we add crazy architecture, and that has been the most productive and creative way for us to actually do work, to the point where it doesn't feel like work. There are certain days at the office where I'm like, well, this is a day of work. That's awesome. Like, I can't wait for tomorrow. And to me, that is how one should start a company, right? So too often I see people, throwing themselves in their work as if there was nothing else that was important. Specifically when they run the company, they have so much responsibility. But one of the responsibilities as the owner of a creative studio is to keep the creativity going. And there needs to be certain aspects like trust, and safety. You can't like go in with crazy ideas and be made fun at. That's not going to work. And the judging needs to go away, right? We're here to judge the quality of the idea rather than the quality of how you got there. Who cares how you got there, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that. Of course, I can't remember the researcher's name on the spot, but one of the researchers in creativity cited psychological safety as one of the most important factors in developing and nurturing creativity. And in the case of students, it would be the classroom. In your case, it's the company culture. I love that. So you're saying that from the get-go, like, you're right, there's kind of this old model where like we all go do our creating in silos, then we come together and kind of like buffet style pick and choose or compare. But you're saying from the get-go, there's sort of this merging of the process. It sounds very selfless, right? Mm-hmm. And that takes the right blend of people for sure.
And that's interesting because a typical firm would be interviewing people and looking at resumes and looking at what school they went to, what companies they worked at. I've never looked at anybody's resume of anybody we work with.
So how do you test someone or kind of like assess them if they're ready for your company?
By speaking to them and really understanding what they want out of this life, what they want out of this creative endeavor, why they were attracted to working with us, things like that, and also what they're willing to learn. If there are certain things that they feel like they want to develop, that is not a waste of time and money for us. That's actually opportunities for us to expand in the future. So when people come to us and say, hey, I have these 3 skills and I'm looking forward to these 17 ones. And we're like, great, come in and let's learn them together. Mm-hmm. And there's so much amazing things happening every day at the office thanks to that way of thinking. I don't know where it comes from. I think I'm just building the company I want to work at. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. Right. And I want to surround myself with people who are open-minded enough to constantly looking beyond what they know, right? Yeah. And that's kind of related to the way people speak about work in the US. I think it's a little bit everywhere. But when you meet people for the first time, potential clients or anybody, they always ask you, how many years of experience do you have? Or do you have experience in this very specific thing? Yeah. And the answer I like to give them is like, most likely no, even though I have 15 years of experience doing this thing, because I'm not interested in doing yet another one of those specific things. Yeah. I want to rethink, step back and rethink, why does this industry exist? Why has it been the same for the last 25 years? Are you interested in actually stepping beyond what everybody else is doing in your in the competition and integrate new technologies, integrate new ways of thinking, new interactions, new everything in order to step forward within this industry. So that's why you should hire a designer, right? A designer is not there just to make things pretty. You don't go to school for that long just to do that.
Right.
We are one of groups of people who have both sides of the brain active. The logical and the creative, even though that's not how the brain is organized. But we have the capability of going both ways. There's another flexible skill that I think creatives should have. I don't think all of them do. So you hear a lot about creatives or designers needing to be empathetic. And that's where the idea of designing for humans comes from, right? You have to understand what they need. You have to understand how to get there, etc. That's extremely important. You have to know how to be empathetic. One thing that I've been selling in the last couple of years is that you also have to be the complete opposite. I think being, sociopathic about an industry is extremely useful as well, because then you step back and you take away all the status quo, all the things that people have been assimilating as true. You question them, and then you start from a different foundation. And that's where innovation, that's where new ideas or ideas that appear to be new come from. And people like strategists, designers, creative of many kinds can poach that world.
Again, it's the magic of the contrast, right? It's the empathy, because you are designing a future for humans, but at the same time, the strong words you use, the sociopathic view, which, like you said, gives you almost a cold, objective look, and maybe you can see some of the absurdities that have been kind of assimilated, like you said, and you can redesign them or design around them. That's wonderful. What I would love to do, if you don't mind, is take one of the other products at Nonfiction Design that you're working on, and I would love if you could first tell us what it is and what problem it solves, but then walk us through pieces of the journey of that creative process. Maybe how the collaboration happened, maybe moments when it seemed stuck, maybe aha moments that seem to come from the either. And just highlight some of these points we're talking about in a real pragmatic sense with the narrative. So I know there's so many cool products out there. I don't know which one you're drawn to talk about, but there's the Halo, which enhances athletic performance, I believe. There's the Trio, which it helps those with tremors.
Maybe we can talk about Trio. I think Trio is a great case study because it's a very unassuming looking product that is very powerful at changing people's lives. So this product was designed for essential tremor sufferers. I'm going to call that ET, right? Essential tremors is when your hands start shaking uncontrollably. Think of it as Parkinson, but Parkinson's actually a different disease. And so you can be at level 1, or you can be all over the place. There's a range to it, and it most likely affects people who are over 65 years old. But some people are affected familially, so they get a little bit younger in life. That's a lot more rare. And so basically, we were exposed to this technology that uses peripheral stimulation, electric stimulation on the nerve end. So the part that controls how your hands move is very deep inside your brain. And the solution you've had so far were very invasive. So you had access to medication, which may or may not work, and may have side effects. And you had access to implants, right? Who wants to open their brain to put some implants in there and have a very small percentage of success? That was very, very scary. So this product not only is great for people suffering from ET, but also is a great solution in the world of non-invasive medical solutions. So this product is a wristband, kind of looks like a watch, and what it does is that it stimulates 3 parts of your wrist and disrupts the feedback loop that's happening between that part of your brain responsible for the tremor and your nerve end. And all you have to do is turn it on, turn it up, or turn it down, depending on how severe your anxiety, your tremors are. And one thing I want to bring up is that people who experience ET tend to have their symptoms exacerbated with anxiety. So anxiety happens when I have hand tremors. I'm out with my family having dinner, and people are looking at me because I'm shaking, right? And because I know people are looking at me, my tremors just get out of control. Or I'm at home, I'm having a cup of coffee, I'm starting to like shake, and the coffee is everywhere on my shirt, and my anxiety goes up. So there's a lot of like very common things that you do every day that are a little bit more difficult for people suffering from that condition. So we really want to bring back a sense of normalcy to these people's lives, right? So notice that so far I haven't talked about the design, right? Everything I'm talking about are things that you need to think about before you even start drawing a line.
Yeah, it's been empathy so far. Empathy, yeah.
Yes. And also it comes to the idea of designing how people feel before designing the product, because the product can be whatever it needs to be, PCB, battery, all that stuff. That's pretty basic. But designing how people feel in their everyday life, in public places, in their personal lives is what's important. So making this product very straightforward, not scary, not looking like a medical product. No, it doesn't have like weird strap, white and silver or whatever. It's very unassuming. And in terms of interaction, it's very basic. There's one big button. That is the one you push, and because, again, those people may or may not have great vision or great control. And so we designed a product that fit all the components, and, the user testing went very well. And then came the time for testing the charging station. So this story is very interesting. Okay. So we had designed a charging station that was very clean and very nice, and, displayed the front of the watch very nicely. And it worked on everybody we tested it on, except one person. So that one person was all over the place, very severely, affected by this disease. And you could see he was starting to experience some pretty high anxiety, and pretty much off the bat told us that there was no way he could put that product into the charger, even though it was, guided with magnets and all that. Yeah. And then he tried and he tried and he tried and he failed. Didn't work. And we came back to the company and say, well, it worked for everybody else. Do we keep the design that we have? Sorry, Don's.
No problem.
So do we change the design just for that person, or do we keep it for the other 99 people that we tried? And for most of the time, we would just go ahead with the design that we want, because in terms of percentage, that's pretty good. But because specifically here, we're talking in changing people's life with a device that we're designing, we actually made the decision to go forward and change the design. And we did it, and that is the design you see today. And when it was time to 3D print and test it again, we brought back that person and had the design. And then they said, did you change the design just for me? And we're like, yes. Oh, wow. And they just started bawling. Yeah, so these are the moments for which we design, right? Design, sure, the aesthetics of it, how clean it is and all that is very important. But the ability to change people's lives with making great solutions attainable to people is really, there's nothing that replaces that.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing the kind of the journey of the Trio product. That's a beautiful, it culminated in that beautiful moment and highlighted so many of the things we've been talking about. Not to mention, just from a disciplines point of view, I mean, wow. Obviously, there's technology, but there's physiology there. I'm sure there was a lot of mathematics that went into it, and then So, what about the How important is it to correctly communicate your design solution so that it's kind of understood in context?
Yes, and I'm great. I'm happy that you brought that up, because it was very important in that specific project as well. most people who suffer from ET don't have a caregiver with them, or their vision might not be good enough that they can read like tiny little words on a user manual. So we design everything to be very straightforward. You could receive the box from the mailman and open it yourself. You didn't need help unless you were missing limbs, and you could open the thing and connect them together. You had to connect a band that was disposable with a stimulator. You could put it on yourself. So if you can imagine like putting on a watch, you have to have dexterity in both hands, where you have to like hold one side and then pull it and then make sure the hole aligned with the little ping there. And it's very, very difficult for people who don't have access to control. So we actually designed a way where a band where the design was pre-looped. So all you have to do was like kind of force your hand through a hole and then close it with a Velcro, and that was it. It's a lot of small innovations like this that actually make or break a product. Another thing that's very important about a product like this is that its efficacy and its how it changes people's lives is going to depend on how often people are going to use it, right? This is a therapy product, and if we design something that is so difficult or so annoying to use every day, people are not going to use every day. And then people are going to start being discouraged by what the medical industry has to offer them. And then it has a repercussion on their mental health. And then, it just goes on like from there. So with the little details like that we can refine in order to make the experience simpler, that's what makes a good design, right? In the end.
It makes me wonder if maybe this has happened to you at Nonfiction Design, if any of the innovative design elements that you've created to solve a problem end up migrating their way back into kind of like a mainstream design. Like, for example, some of the things you did for the Trio could be very relevant for watches in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been so fascinating and insightful. I feel like we could talk for a few more hours and kind of go through the whole product inventory, but we'll stop here. So on screen right now, people see your email contact and also your Insta handle. If they want to follow and kind of dig, they're probably intrigued and want to dig in. Is it nonfictiondesign.com is the URL?
No, it's nonfiction.design.
Nonfiction.design. Okay, there you go. Oh, yeah, it's right there too. Okay.
And another thing is that we recently launched a series of video called Future.
Yes, that's right. It was on my notes to mention it. I'm glad that you remembered. Yeah, tell us about the YouTube series. Yeah.
So Future is me and my business partner talking about the future of everything. And we're starting with the future of airlines and how this should evolve from this whole COVID situation. And we illustrate everything that we talk about with renderings or different types of images.
Yeah.
And also talk about the future of the design industry, because we cannot be designers in using methodologies and tools that have been the same for a long time. We need to be at the forefront of manufacturing. We need to be at the forefront of very complex fabrication. So all the latest and greatest will be on Future.
Yeah, I loved episode 1 about the airlines. Just give us a little gem. If you were hired tomorrow by the CEO of American Airlines, give us 2 or 3 innovations that you'd make right off the bat regarding air travel.
Definitely integrating more robotics. We have access to a lot of robotic service technology today that can help with safety, with service, with convenience, with all that. So robotics is one. Also a no or low touch technology. So everything having to do with you not touching other things is great for not only the COVID situation, but also for everybody's peace of mind.
Could I have a touchless bathroom experience on an airplane in the future? Is that possible?
It could be possible, okay. Yes. We have the technology.
Okay. Yeah, so I cut you off. What was it? You were about to go into another idea, I think.
Oh, so many ideas. Really thinking about parents, how they travel, and how inconvenient it is up there for mothers to nurse, to change their babies, to for the kids to play, and kind of like release all that energy. It's a lot of secondary thoughts that needs to become primary.
Yeah, I love that. Any teaser on the topic for episode 2? What will you guys be jamming on?
Oh, episode 2 is also about airlines.
Okay.
Yeah, the first 2 episodes will be about airlines, and then moves on to something else.
Okay.
Yeah, this one is going to be about reintegrating pleasure into flights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you watch those old movies about the early days of flight, passenger flight, it was like this luxurious, pleasurable experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And same with cinema. When you think about old movies and how big the sets were and how much time is on the scene, it's very different from movies today, where it's like as much action as possible per second. So really thinking about the history of things and analyzing what works and what can be evolved into something that's more modern is also creative. Coming back full circle to the beginning of the
Yeah, beautiful. And best place for people to find the Future series, it's on YouTube, so that is search for your channel on YouTube.
Yeah, search for nonfiction design on YouTube and you'll find them. We will post a new video every week. We have many subjects that are very exciting that are coming up. And if you are interested in any subject for us to talk about, just holler.
Ooh, I love it. Go subscribe, everybody. It's worth it. All right, Phnam, thank you for taking the time today. It was a great chat. I'm super inspired. I love getting insights into the mind of an innovator, a real living, breathing innovator who's doing design with human beings in mind. Very cool stuff. Thanks for joining us. Who knows, maybe you'll be back on the show sometime in the future to talk about a brand new innovative design that's impacted the world post-COVID.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me. It was super fun.
Okay. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in again. We'll see you in the next episode for another fascinating conversation. Enjoy this one. Go check out Nonfiction Design and all of the amazing things happening over there. And have a good one. Stay real and stay inspired.